Well, hey, everybody, and let me pull up my notes, but not for you guys. You don't see that. Shh, I do this all off memory. We're talking about Shadow IT specifically. Thanks for joining. With me, of course, is George Smith with Augmentt. I'm Ricky Cicchini, VP of Product here at CloudRadial, and we're going to be talking about how Shadow IT is really important, but more importantly, again, kind of that client-facing spin. What does that mean for your customers? How do you use Shadow IT to your advantage? And again, how do you actually verbalize it, visualize it, make it something that your average person can actually care about? George, I didn't mean to do your introduction for you, but I've already introduced you. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to note with us both with slightly new and improved facial hair as well. So there we go.
I saw. Do you want to talk about it?
I don't know. Not really. They're just we'll see. People can leave their positive reinforcement or cheeky comments in the Q&A or chat. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll take a poll on it later.
Yeah, we'll do a live poll later on whether George's mustache is working.
Quite topical.
We'll Photoshop that on later if we like it. Let's get cracking. So yes, real quick, who is CloudRadial, right? Not a person, so maybe what is CloudRadial? But no, who is CloudRadial? Many people I think on this call are familiar. If you're not, a quick recap is we ultimately are, in a very visual sense, we're a client-facing portal, so something that an MSP or an IT service provider purchases and then actually has your customers or your users using to interact in various ways. Those are a lot of different ways. So if anyone's talked to us within a recent amount of time, we've kind of struggled to get a good definition going. So what we've ended up kind of talking about is this concept of a CSA. So a CSA to us is client services automation. So most of you, if not all of you, are very, very familiar with PSAs, right? You know that they're kind of your home base, your hub. They're kind of how you work with your internal tax, right? Maybe you do billing through there. Maybe you do, you integrate a bunch of tools in there, again, kind of like the back-end base. So our analogy is that a client services automation tool, or CSA, which is what we are, is kind of like the customer-facing equivalent to that, right? So again, if you think about it, an analogy we like to use a lot, it's kind of like a restaurant. If you're kind of thinking about the entire restaurant, your PSA is like your back of house. That's where you actually get the cooking going, you get all the orders settled, but the way that you actually serve that to your customers and have interactions, that's a CSA. So when we talk about that, again, in a greater context, what we do is we integrate a bunch of features that speak to that, right? So I have plenty of partners, Augmentt of which is one of the very best. And we're talking about how all these different features, again, come together to offer value to your customers to kind of round out their user experience and make sure that everything really fits. Again, restaurant analogy, right? You have chairs, you have tables, you have menus, you can actually order stuff. All of that put together becomes the customer experience, and it plays off your back end in the PSA. So it's very important. And then, of course, we have Augmentt, and I will swap immediately to the slide for you, George, and you take on over, please.
Great. Thanks, Ricky. Hi, everyone. Yeah, George Smith from Augmentt here. So I know many of you are familiar or partners with us already, but for those of you who are new and unfamiliar with Augmentt, what we're doing is really trying to help MSPs offer what we're terming SaaS services. So the ability to monitor, audit, manage, and secure cloud applications. And kind of step one is actually working out who is using what. So we know that everybody's working from home. The network is shrinking. Ricky and I are two separate business people, but he's in Texas, I'm in Ontario, but we could easily start a business tomorrow focused on our passion of Dungeons and Dragons. If we wanted to order our laptops on Amazon, fire them up, head onto a browser and start downloading, whether it's Microsoft 365, Calendly, Monday.com, Slack, whatever we want to run the business. The issue that we're trying to help MSPs solve is really regain that visibility into Shadow IT. And for those of you who maybe are unfamiliar with the term Shadow IT, it's basically related to parts of IT, in this particular instance, SaaS or cloud applications that you're unaware even being used. So really what it comes down to is if you think about your clients and you were to go and ask some of them today, how many SaaS applications are you actually using in your organization? You might have to explain what SaaS is first of all, but once they realize it's Facebook and Adobe, things like that, they probably might take a guess. So they don't really know. Second question would be, are they secure and compliant? If you have certain policies that you need to adhere to, or if you need to be HIPAA compliant, like are the applications you're using, do they address those needs and are you compliant? And then Probably the biggest one is, do you have duplicate applications, unused applications, or underused licenses? So the idea, we see it in organizations and other vendors all the time that we're talking to. How many people, you are using Teams, Zoom, GoToWebinar, and Slack? Everyone's got their different preferences, but fundamentally, those are 4 communication applications. Do you need 4 communication applications at an organization of 30 to 40 people? Probably not. So that begs the question then, should MSPs really be monitoring and reporting on SaaS usage? To easily answer this, we think yes. The idea, is that there is this iceberg happening. There's this stuff that you do know people are using, or even the CEOs at your clients or CFOs know they're using, but they're completely unaware that Mary from marketing has signed up to 3 tools at home, or that Bradley down the road has, signed up to these other things. Whether or not those are risky applications, if they're secure applications, what type of data is going into that. And really, we're focused on helping to consolidate that stack and give you guys the opportunity to monetize a shadow IT audit as well.
Yeah, and I think there was also that conversation of like, what do the MSPs want in general as well, right?
Yeah, kind of survey says, correct us if we're wrong, but we believe sort of 90% of MSPs obviously want to grow their revenue. Everybody wants more monthly recurring revenue. Obviously save time and make things easier in terms of processes around sales and acquiring new customers. Driving down the cost of delivering those services. So whether it's through things like automation or just using specific technology that empowers your staff so that technicians or other MSP employees can manage more seats in the same amount of time, and ultimately just continue to be that trusted IT advisor. That's kind of the original role, right? IT is such a big part of everyday life. People realize the need that they need to upgrade their own IT IQ, but there's still a huge reliance on MSPs to be those trusted advisors on, hey, you should really be doing this, avoid that. Here's my my expertise and my opinion on the direction and some of the things you need to implement at your business from an IT and technical standpoint.
Yeah. And today I also wanted to kind of lay out what we're talking about, because again, we have these concepts that I think, again, probably everybody has dealt with numerous times. You're probably actively working on improving or revising your strategy when it comes to, again, client-facing processes, your SaaS management. And again, shadow IT is the name of the game here. So specifically what we're going over today is, again, setting the stage, clarifying what is that shadow IT really, where I come from, right? And kind of my angle to this, as we'll see, it's how do you take something that is visual, right? That is easily understood, take that seeing is believing concept and doing away with trust, right? At CloudRadial, we're kind of on a path to eliminate the QBR, because we believe that I think the more inherent and the more applicable regular day-to-day things are, if you can see them, you can understand them, you don't really need to sit down and explain things to people. You can kind of have just a logical conversation of, we're seeing X, therefore we want to do Y, right? So if we can show these things, that's super powerful. The concept of the good gateway drug, that's the next point, an actual nice one, is related to the one right after the point after that, which is how can we take something that may not seem like a massive deal, right? We're going to correlate how shadow IT is going to help you potentially sell like NOC services, right? These things are relatively unrelated, but again, it's a gateway to understanding and building a foundation of zero trust, of just showing them what you mean. And then obviously we're going to talk about with Augmentt's Discover platform, and then the other thing Augmentt can do, how that is kind of the key to starting this process, unlocking this process. And then of course we have our shared promos for those that don't know, and you can get some pretty sweet deals on CloudRadial and Augmentt by working together with us. So I think that's about as much PowerPoint as I can stomach. I hope you guys are cool with that. So we are going to get off of this guy and start talking in intangibles, which is what I prefer. So let me go ahead and stop my screen share. And George, I think we're just going to trade back and forth. That's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if we want to start, kind of going back to, again, just defining what shadow IT is, and then, maybe you can speak to the sort of seeing is believing. So, without overcomplicating it, guys, shadow IT, as we know, is really just people using unsanctioned IT. Now, some people have broader definitions of it that include things like, when people are using USB hard drives or things like that. But today we're really just focusing on cloud applications. And it's a very real problem because of the ease of which you can sign up to use SaaS. It's everywhere. All you need is an email and maybe a credit card, and then it just creates this bloat. And really what we want to hone in on is, by getting visibility into this, we're able to have conversations around risk, around cost, and around productivity. But maybe, Ricky, you can speak to the whole seeing is believing point, and that's something the CloudRadial does really well by bringing a lot of information to the attention of end users through the CSP portal.
Yes, and that's something that, again, I know that hopefully a fair bit of you have seen CloudRadial before, but I'd like to share a little bit of it. And this concept, again, the most tangible way, I brought up the CSA concept and what that means and all that, but I think for a lot of people, having that visibility and understanding what that can tangibly look like is helpful. So hopefully you can see that okay. This concept of seeing is believing simply is just taking all the complexities of the services rendered by the IT provider and making them touchable, right? Tangible, real. And really quickly, right, that means that for things such as, I don't know, let's talk about like, your onboard, offboard forms, or your provisioning equipment or whatever have you. These are very real things, right? These are things that all of a sudden, if you have a customer portal, and realistically, right, you can do this with SharePoint or with even your PSAs built in stuff, you can get that tangibility. You can get the customers to understand and click on stuff and engage, which is great. But as we look at more important things, right, more strategic things, you kind of have to go level past. So, CloudRadial as a platform can be really complex because there's so much stuff in there. And I think this talks about the concept of, well, what gets that needle moving for you, right? When we talk about seeing is believing, where does that start for you? So rather than focus on features that we have that are more like intranet, right, your ticket forms or your training and whatnot, which we have, we're more focused on visualizing information, right? So what we're talking about in CloudRadial is maybe that information includes their endpoints, right? Maybe showing the end users the endpoints they have, or like a wrap-up report of, I don't know, the policies, right? So it's like tangibly taking a bunch of technical data, showing it to someone who has zero attention span and going, hey, we've compiled all these issues. Here's what we want you to focus on. And in general, this is the stuff that starts to set up that gateway drug, right? We're not going over the RAM or the clock speed of a PC, because that doesn't really mean much strategically to a person. We're going over, how does that affect your overall business, right? We see 1 billion tickets coming in for slow computers, no doubt, because we see that people have slow computers, right? So we, instead of having to discuss the upgrades on one machine, which might be a ticket, we're now discussing how do we increase the productivity of your business, or how do we make sure you're compliant, right? So this visualization, seeing is believing, the more you can put this kind of stuff in front of customers, the less they have to kind of fight you on it and not believe, what you say. They can actually go back and check you. So when we look at all this stuff and we kind of place it into context, it means that this is neat, right? I mean, I work at CloudRadial and I think a lot of these features are awesome, but something that is very realistic, right? And we should never shy away from, I want to be very direct here, is that this doesn't make, what I refer to as my dad or your mom or whatever, want to use the portal, right? Because again, you're looking for that customer engagement. So I think that one of the very special things that Augmentt has to offer, and this is a very important thing with Shadow IT, is that Shadow IT is very unique in that it speaks to something that everybody understands, right? People, generally speaking, may be a little bit overwhelmed by understanding performance metrics or even compliance, but understanding who's using what and what's sanctioned and what's not is something that immediately benefits some of the customers you have. It immediately puts value into their hands and it makes them want to explore more. So again, that's kind of the gateway drug, a concept. And I think, George, we had talked before about how, having a SaaS audit can be even the starting part of that in the first place. And I think that's where a lot of people begin to start the Shadow IT conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's great points there. People talk about doing, audits or cybersecurity checks, things like that. And often, there can be such detail that you can present through a security lens to your end users. And depending on the technical IQ of that end user, the eyes can start to glaze over pretty quickly once you start talking about RAM or backup success. Whereas asking those questions, saying, how many apps do you think you use? 7? It's actually 27. Did you know that this person is using this North Korean file sharing app? Are people allowed to use Facebook, while they're working for your company? Like, do you guys do a lot of marketing on that? Oh, no, you don't. Okay, well, here's 5 people that use it every single day. Were you aware of that activity? And all of a sudden, it's something, like to Ricky's point, tangible, that you can have a very high level conversation with about that end users get. And it's always funny being the fly on the wall in these conversations, because we see MSPs, rightly so, really focusing on the risk aspect of it, but end users always go towards like the social media stuff, right? Oh, yeah, I don't care about that North Korean file sharing app. Are you telling me that Ricky has been sitting on Instagram all day every day? Let's look at that more, right? So it's funny because they want to focus on that, but there's also a really nice crossover from just the cost point of view. Everyone, you MSPs or business owners yourself, it's all about trying to make money and save money, and dovetailing those two together. And I think the stat is something like 33% of IT spend is wasted on SaaS sprawl, because people have signed up to so many tools that they're not even using or aware of. And so being able to present that information in a nice clean format, even just give open access to it through the CloudRadial portal, so people can go in and check up on a daily basis and see for themselves. It's a really powerful asset to have, and provides a lot of value to your customers.
Yeah, and this is something else we had discussed prior to this webinar, and we were discussing how to kind of bring this up and how to make it interesting. I think that like this kind of natural path with shadow IT, because shadow IT tends to be clumped in with security, which I think is fair, right? Obviously, it is the immediate need, but again, this path of like, okay, transparency to better security to increased margins and profits, right? And how do we get there? How do we bridge that gap? I think that's the most important and interesting part of the shadow IT conversation ultimately, right? Because not only does it help you get past that initial hump, but it starts to put in motion the concept that like, hey, I got nothing to hide. I have good suggestions and I want you to take me kind of seriously. So what George and I wanted to do is we wanted to talk about just in general, the concept of getting those different stages and maybe tangibly showing you how you get to there. I want to bring up CloudRadial once again to show how we do it natively and how what a difference Augmentt makes whenever you have that in your strategy in general. So I will once again share my screen just as before. And again, based on that conversation I'd kind of built on previously, again, put yourself in the shoes of your day-to-day person, right? They're running their own business, or at least maybe working with like an office admin or a point of contact, or somebody who's not running the business, but still has a relationship with you. These people are always going to be more interested in doing their own jobs and living their own lives and kind of handling their own stuff rather than dealing with all the stuff. So again, that you bring to them. So making sure this conversation is quick and easy is important, but very, very critical that not only do we feed them a bunch of information, like I was saying, but we make something of it. So I'm currently sharing a demo account that we use and we abuse quite a bit. And this is supposed to be theoretically, a mature client of yours that has a bunch of information. So they may have, again, like we saw before, a bunch of computers. They may have a bunch of policies. Maybe they have a lot of Office 365 usage, which we'll talk about that in a little bit as well, right? So they might have an abundance of licenses. They might have a plethora of emails coming in, right? There's a lot of data coming in and out of this company. And I think that is cause for concern, right? Because these are ways that you visualize, hey, look at all these different potential openings or threat vectors that we have into your business. Fine. But reporting by itself doesn't move the needle, right? It just overwhelms. So specifically to get to that, from client transparency to action and profits, we have to be able to take data and make it correlated, right, all the way down to an action in a simple way that doesn't require hours of explanation or QBRs, right? Something that people can kind of get on the fly. So our general approach to this is to fill this information in with whatever source of data we can and kind of come down and fill it out in a planner. Now, for those that have seen this, again, I want you to understand what I'm saying more so than what I'm showing. I think that whether you use CloudRadial or not, the key point here is that being able to take your data and make a story of it is really what I'm saying, right? CloudRadial does that in a way that, again, contextualizes it inside of one portal. So again, keeping that kind of single pane of glass CSA concept alive means taking all these things and saying, hey, for Q1, we're going to focus on the laptop refresh. Why would we do that? Why are you recommending this thing right here that I can move around? Well, again, if we can correlate that we saw, a bunch of tickets or a bunch of processors that are slow and whatever it may be, then it makes sense. Then we finally have a context for it. Now, as I was saying before with Augmentt and Shadow IT, how that relates specifically is by showing them specific details that matter to them, right? Things they can understand, who's going where, and how many things do you not know? Like George was saying, then you open up a really, really powerful conversation, because you may have been talking to your customers about being more secure, right? If not selling them an entire security solution, maybe just doing relatively simple things, right? Turning on MFA or enforcing certain policies to get them secure, get them compliant. And again, out of the blue, that just sounds like a lot of work with not a lot of reward. And it's hard to visualize what that really means. So when we take something like Augmentt, I'm going to give a sneak preview, right? Not only can we show them the sheer volume of software applications and whatnot that they have in there, but also I can actually show them, right? Powered by Augmentt, what are they using? And again, to the average person, this is attractive, right? RAM, don't care. What I do care about is if I go to my portal and I click on who's using Facebook, right? What is the impact? I can know that Della Case is using Facebook all day, right? She visits it a bunch of times, and that's not good for the productivity. Or maybe, again, I'm the IT contact that you're working with, right? Maybe you have a co-managed agreement, and all of a sudden you realize that, hey, yeah, we have somebody's using Dropbox to port files in and out, or whatever have you, right? This is the kind of stuff that matters a lot to people, because again, they don't know, they don't have that visibility, and having that in one place, I think, is really powerful. So I think that George may have a little bit of insight of where this stuff comes from, but in general, I want to talk about how that kind of comes back to paying SOC services after we kind of take a look at that, if that's all right with you guys.
Fine by me, Ricky, fine by me. Cool. Well, what I'll do, guys, I will just open up the Augmentt portal here just so you can kind of see what things look like in Augmentt, and then as Ricky showed, all that information is being able to be pulled through into the CloudRadial portal. So let me just go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so guys, this is Augmentt Discover, and we do have a couple of other modules like Engage and Secure, but Discover is the one that is focused on Shadow IT specifically. And as we've talked about, what it's doing is basically shedding a spotlight on Shadow IT, we're giving you that SaaS inventory. So we've got some kind of, standard functions. We can export this information as a PDF, CSV, Excel file. We can generate a report that goes as far back as 90 days. And of course, we're fully multi-tenant as well, so can easily hop between an all companies view or various different companies that we are servicing. We also have the ability to filter by user. So to Ricky's point, if there is a particular employee at a certain company that we know is a consistent offender of using Shadow IT, of constantly signing up for unsanctioned SaaS applications, we can actually generate a specific user report. Now, in terms of how we're getting this information, Augmentt Discover uses a lightweight agent that is can be deployed in a number of ways, but the most common for MSPs is just via your RMM. So we have integrations and scripts available for all the major RMM players like your Kaseyas, Datos, Enables, etc. And then some of the more emerging ones as well, like Synchro, Ninja, those two. And that's all within our knowledge base where it's just all good to go. Everything works nice and smoothly. What the agent does is it sits and basically parses out the web traffic of that particular user and sets it against our database of SaaS applications. That's almost, I think, at 22,000 now. So kind of give you some insight into just how many applications are out there. I think it's key to sort of point out that we are just looking at the applications. So if somebody is, on a gambling website or something like that, we're not pulling in that information. We don't track mouse movement. We don't mirror screens. We don't take over people's webcams. We're just interested in saying, here's the applications that people are using. Did you know that they were using the Shadow IT? Here's how often, and so that we can present that information through these various audits and reports. Now, whenever you pull in the information, Augmentt automatically categorizes as well as scores the particular application. So whether it's based on approval status, risk score, or productivity. The cool thing is you as an MSP are able to change those. It's just so that you don't have to do it all by yourself. But if you disagree with the risk score that we've given a particular application or the productivity score, very, very easy to change that. You can also set up global rules. So you can say, okay, if someone uses Dropbox, that should be restricted because it's high risk and sort of medium productivity. That's the blanket rule for everyone, except for this client where for whatever reason, they are allowed to use Dropbox as part of their stack. So in that way, it shows up green for them and doesn't skew any of your reporting. In terms of what the report looks like, this is our sort of list of applications. So you can go down and see the application name, the category it's under, the status. And again, we can filter and generate specific reports. So you can say, show me, restricted status. And to be clear, guys, whenever we say an app is restricted, we're not necessarily blocking it. It just is basically highlighting that this is unsanctioned. People shouldn't be using this. So let's take a report and see who is using it. So we can instantly pull up that information. Then we can even, do things here like toggle days active. So what is the most popular, sort of unsanctioned application, or kind of sort of through that way. Because we have the agent, we're able to get granular with information. We can actually click into users to see who specifically is using what and how often. And we also have the ability to differentiate, is it the desktop or the browser version of the application that they're using? So did they head to the website or browser version once to check something out, or do they actually have it installed on their local desktop? So what this does for you as an MSP is it kind of arms you with some critical data. We know people at business, they love making data informed decisions, and just to simply export this or highlight it through CloudRadial as part of a conversation and say, did you know that it's actually, if I get rid of this filter, you thought you're using 6 apps, it's actually 21. Did you know that your most, as a marketing agency, your top application is Adobe? Well, that makes sense. And you use Google a lot, so there's G Suite. But did you also know that loads of people are using Microsoft Teams? Maybe they prefer that. I'm not really sure why if you're a Google shop. So just presenting that information in a way that kind of helps pose the question to your end user and gets them thinking. And that's why we kind of refer to it as that gateway drug. Can help generate conversation that allows you to speak to your expertise, the value you provide, as well as sort of, okay, well, we've identified the problem. You agree that this is an issue. How do you want me to handle the risk that I've identified for you today? There is a plan. There is something I can do to help. Let's talk about that. And so that's where things kind of with Augmentt, specifically within our secure module, we can actually begin to kind of take that next step. If the shadow IT conversation is the gateway drug to a larger security conversation, it's almost, certain that you're probably going to start with Microsoft 365. That's what most people are using to run their business. If something catastrophic happened, it would, be terrible for that business. And so probably makes sense that we start there to make sure security is optimized and to take some kind of, baby steps forward in security that aren't going to overwhelm the end user or have those eyes glaze over. And within Augmentt Secure, we have things like a threat report, again, that just, fully multi-tenant. You can filter through the dates. This is showing sort of all the risky information associated with a particular Microsoft tenant. So again, you can have that conversation. Here's all the risky stuff happening specifically in your Microsoft environment. Do you want me to fix this? Absolutely, no problem. I can get MFA turned on. I can remove these inactive accounts, and then use the MSP can use our security posture report as a bit of a roadmap. If we hop into someone else here, you can see here's all the security checks that, according to Microsoft, they should have in place, but currently aren't configured or only partially configured. Again, if we pick on something like user MFA, we can quickly jump in and actually begin to configure that, update things, get MFA turned on, get it rolled out so that it's going to increase those security scores, which again, I'm pretty sure you can view in CloudRadial as well, correct, Ricky?
Very correct.
Yeah. So again, if you want to think of CloudRadial as that kind of source of truth for a lot of your technology, for client viewing purposes, Augmentt's a great tool for you to use to kind of actually go in and begin to not only identify stuff yourself, but be proactive with security, with your security, begin to remediate things, and even do things like set up alerts. So if there's a decrease in compliance, if someone turns off MFA, if an account becomes inactive, you immediately become notified of that so that you can go in, activate MFA, or remove that account successfully. So you're keeping that security baseline high. And again, that's all around the conversation of the value you provide. That's why they're paying you that extra for, your security services. And even Augmentt has the ability for you to generate quick reports, that show that in terms of, we've prevented these incidents, the trend line's going down now, we've increased your security score, we've got 100% MFA. Here's some of the IP addresses we've blocked. Here's some of the incidents that have happened with the who, what, where, when, etc. This is why you're paying me an extra $3 per user, or this is why you've enrolled in our gold or platinum security plan. And again, if you want to dive deeper into things like going back to your shadow IT, hop into CloudRadial anytime and take a look. And kind of to pull things back to shadow IT, I think a lot of end users maybe feel a little bit helpless with certain details of IT because it's not their forte, it's not what they're competent in, and that's why they're leveraging a managed service provider. But with something like SaaS usage, it does kind of give them a bit of a bone to chew on. Like they understand what an Adobe, what an a Facebook, what a Slack is, and they understand why paying for 4 things that do the same thing isn't a good business decision. They understand maybe with some coaching for you from you why some apps are more riskier than others. And like I say, coming back to that gateway drug, it really begins to kind of get them thinking about the fundamentals of cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think you have a couple of questions waiting from Mark as well. That's been asking about,
Gotcha.
I think MFA specifically. Maybe take
So MFA, so Mark, for the minute, the MFA is specifically just for Microsoft. And then we have an Engage module that lets you turn it on for Microsoft and Google, but we're not able to report on MFA across the board for all applications currently. And second question, I will have to get back to that, Mark. I'm just going to copy that into my notes. Get you an email answer for that one.
Yeah, I think, picking up from that to really hammer down what I really do believe is the most important part is, again, going from transparency to security to profit margins and stuff. And I mean, in general, right? So just like George is saying, that gateway drug concept is just saying, can you give them an entry point? The way that when we were prepping for this webinar, even we were talking about like, well, what is the value here? And I think that for us, right, I'll again bring up CloudRadial once again, there's been an issue, right? And you'll always have this issue with really any tool that does a lot. Where do you begin, right? Where do you begin to digest information on something that is so complicated, that is so dynamic, that can be, some parts are interesting to some, other parts are interesting to others. Well, again, you have to come up with something that is inherently interesting, is inherently understandable. And Shadow IT in, Augmentt's Discover form is that, right? It's something that is, again, it starts that conversation. And just like George was saying, what it's really intended to do, as far as what we see in ours and what we've seen in real life, right, is to generate that question of like, well, okay, I kind of need to know what I don't know. I need to understand how much I don't understand. And if you start there, right, just, okay, well, how many people are going to Facebook? I don't know. Let me show you. Or how many people are using apps that you don't know? I don't know. Let me show you. And again, driving that conversation is like, you know what? Maybe the Facebook thing would be nice to stop, but that's not really killing our business. Maybe the fact that people are saving to box and that shouldn't be something is, right? So let's throw that on the planner. Beginning these conversations and kind of throwing this down and starting that up is how we get to the next step. So again, like George was saying, this specifically is not a direct integration with Augmentt, but it's related, right? In terms of Microsoft, which is, again, the next entry point. So we're kind of working our way up. They see the Shadow IT, they understand there's something to do about it. It's a good conversation starter. The next question is, where do we begin, right, to start locking stuff down? Well, hey, MFA is a pretty logical step, right? It's something that doesn't take that much effort. Obviously, it can be a pain, but it doesn't take that much effort. And like George was saying, even though you can go inside of Augmentt and remediate that, right, and you can set up those conditional access policies and whatnot, CloudRadial, because it's tied into Office data, it can show that. So like if I need to go in, right, and even though I manage this within Augmentt, you guys do, as the customer, we can actually focus down on something and say like, hey, I want to see, I want to see who is enabled. I briefly forgot how to use CloudRadial. I promise I know how to use it. I want to see who's got MFA turned on and who doesn't, right? You might start off with that and they might see that as well. So again, it's about taking that trust out. It's just going, hey, I can show you where we're at. I can show you where you're at. Do you want me to fix it, right? And that is really what we're after here. We're after one of those paths that's very rare, which is to be able to tangibly show something, remediate against it, and show them in their portal that it got fixed, right? We turned this red thing to green thing after we had that conversation. Fantastic. Now we can feel better about it. Not only is that important for you, right, and for them, but we've seen a lot of conversations come out of compliance and audits and stuff like that too. So again, having that log saying we had that conversation, we had this action taken, that action resulted in this, in a way that's accessible to everybody, is super helpful, right? There's no email chain, there's no he said, she said, right? It's all locked and loaded in here. And again, you've affected those changes in a way that's completely visible, completely transparent. So when it comes to selling additional security services specifically, that's why, again, in CloudRadial, we offer a lot of these conversation starters. So like one of the things that we offer, and I mentioned this earlier, and it doesn't seem to do anything. People have asked me a lot about this email activity thing, right? This is the email sent from the Office accounts, right? So this is specifically hey, we received 90 emails, we may have sent 14, we're not very good at answering. And then maybe there's this really big spike. What happened there, right? This is to kind of help visualize it again. Hey, just like you didn't know about your SaaS application usage, just how shadow IT is kind of a mystery to you, here's all these other things that we can visualize, we can make a story out of that we should be addressing. So all of a sudden, being able to say like, hey, if we caught that and we did a good job with that and we understand that, maybe it's not so much of a stretch to say, if we have these things to offer, there's a reason we do, right? We're not just saying these things to try to get a buck out of you. We're saying these things because they matter, because again, your compliance is at risk, your data is at risk, right? These penalties that you may be paying, right? Whether it's just paying out the butt because you got hacked, or maybe because you're getting sued, whatever it may be, are real things because they're tangible and they can see them. And then the next step after that is, again, if you can establish that relationship, I think that that's where we get into the deeper stuff too. So talking about profit margins, talking about understanding that is about being able to show them once that you mean business, that you can do that. And then being able to move on to other stuff, like, again, refreshing laptop policies, or maybe email archive solutions, and talking about when to do that. So this starts to peel you away, right? Again, we're anti-QBR here at CloudRadial because we want to peel away the idea of sitting down and having a conversation over something that really could be a ticket, or could be a card, or could be whatever, right? Focusing instead on the bigger picture of like, well, how do we actually get secure? How do we get productive? How do we get there? Because if you can get to that, then all of a sudden, those are bundles of solutions. Those are entire years worth of projects. Those are talking to the customers going, where do you want your business to go? Not how can I spruce up your assistant's laptop, right? That's where we really want to go. And again, that conversation, as mind-blowing as it is, doesn't start by knocking on their door or meeting with them once a month or whatever it may be. It starts by showing them that seeing is believing, right? That we have that data, that we want to do things in their best interest, and always making that interactive and collaborative, and putting that in their hands. And I think that's how we really kind of start that stuff in the first place.
You want to get paid for it.
And you want to get paid for it. So I think that that was the other thing that we talked about previously. And I don't have a clever slide or an easy example for this, but I think that, like, kind of coming from the heart, a lot of you people on the call will understand this, that when we talk about the fundamental difference between MSP number one and MSP number two, and MSP number one charges however much, $10 a seat, and MSP number two charges $1,000 a seat, you got to be able to justify that cost difference. If you're charging the $1,000, how dare you charge that much more? And I think that, again, the difference between those two MSPs, besides obviously experience and IP or whatever, to a customer is invisible, because they don't know how good you are. They don't know how professional you are. They don't know how awesome your tool set is until they work with you. So that's a lot of risk. So I think that when it comes to, again, visualizing, again, that's the key term here, visualizing shadow IT, putting that spotlight on it, giving them a place to interact with it, becomes the difference, right? It becomes the difference of saying, like, not only am I good at what I do, and you'll be able to judge that during the course of our relationship, but I can actually show you where all that stuff exists, why I recommend what I do. And that's why I buy the best tools and I sell them at $1,000. And if I want to buy another tool to sell you because I think you need it, and raise your price to $1,500 per seat, it's not out of the blue, right? It's not a surprise. It's not a secret. And that's really the secret that we've seen for a lot of people to being able to charge more, which is not really a shock if you think about it. You're able to charge more when you tell people what they're buying or what they're paying for and why they're paying for it, right? Instead of just raising prices going, we need it, or worse, which is what a lot of MSPs do, eating the cost of stuff. Hate when people do that. But a lot of the MSP industry is conditioned to eat the cost of things because, again, security specifically, hey, guess what? We need to have an email filtering tool, or we need to have a DNS tool or whatever. But having that conversation, another conversation with the customer saying, I need to raise your price, is going to put you on thin ice. We don't like that. So what do? We eat the cost because we can't show that value easily. So shadow IT is really, really important because, again, it really is the centerpiece, the easiest way in that we've seen for people to start that conversation in general. And yeah, I think that even though you gave a little bit of a demo, I think definitely be sure to check out Augmentt, because I think secure, specifically the module, even though CloudRadial specifically, what we were seeing is discover. We're talking about that initial point of conversation, having that ability to go into the initial security bit and being able to show and affect changes. Secure is a fantastic way to, again, get in the door and make sure you start off on the right foot with your customers.
For sure. And just so people know, in case you missed it, I did pop in the chat there a link to our sort of CloudRadial Augmentt promo page. So if you're not already an existing partner or you're already working with CloudRadial but not Augmentt, you can activate 100 free licenses of the Augmentt platform. So you can immediately roll out Discover, you can get your hands on secure, and those are external licenses, guys, for you to roll out to your clients. It also includes a full NFR. So roll out Discover, start tracking that SaaS inventory usage, and then simply reach out to us to get the connection, the integration with CloudRadial activated, and you can immediately start pulling in that data there. The one thing I would just kind of finish up by saying is just around the compliance piece that you mentioned, Ricky. I think that's a great hook there. Simply maybe explaining or highlighting to your customers, this is what our MSA says. This is the things that we under contract are managing and helping you with. Things like Microsoft 365, things like that includes Teams. Maybe we take care of some other bits and pieces, but here's this list of 27 apps, okay, which is not included. So, and then just bring it down to the sort of very real possibility. It's the world we're living in today where there's breaches left, right, and center. If a customer were to get breached and after sort of, an analysis, it was because they had used their Microsoft credentials to also sign up for Canva. Canva got hacked. They got those credentials. That's how they got into Microsoft, took down the business. Are they going to come and point the finger at you and say, you're my MSP, you should have done that? Whenever you can also kind of say, well, I had no idea you're even using Canva. So I think it's worth having those hard or those sassy conversations with your customers to be like, we want to get on the same page here. We want to make sure you're secure and protected. But that means we've got to have full visibility into your usage. We've got to consolidate things, and that we have to have a clear understanding of what exactly it is you're paying for. And you're not currently paying for me to secure all the stuff you're using or help you with all the stuff you're using, but that's a conversation we can have if it's essential. So let's talk.
Yeah. And for Bart, and by the way, I'm seeing it. I don't think they're able to access the chat, but I have it screen shared right now. At the very least, we can show you.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
it's just try.augmentt.com/CloudRadial. So yeah.
And it goes both ways. So like George is saying, yes, just to go cover the promo stuff. Yeah, we have the Augmentt offer, right? And obviously you can pick up both. And then if you work with Augmentt already and you're coming in, you're going to be a brand new partner, you can use the coupon code Augmentt to get $100 off your first 3 months. Give that a shot. And we are month-to-month pricing. So definitely worth a try if you want to pick it up, see how the portal can work for you, see what your clients think, and then give this a shot, right? Really run through, again, this compliance conversation, this shadow IT conversation, and just have that initial bit to talk to them and really see what's going on. So again, for us, it's cloudradial.com/Augmentt. And for Augmentt, it's try.augmentt.com/CloudRadial. And I think that if I may speak for my marketing team, I believe we send out the recording of this to anyone who signed up for it, and we'll be able to include those links in there as well. So if you're not able to snag them or misspell them or whatever, shouldn't be that big of a deal. Should be able to get those to you pretty easily, I think.
Cool.
Let's see.
Any other
Bart,
questions?
Let me answer Bart. Bart's asking, let's see. He was asking about why is Autotask in our professional plan. So CloudRadial, for those that don't know, has 3 different plans. We have a starter plan, we have a professional plan, which is kind of the mid-tier, and then we have an enterprise plan. And really the difference between the starter and the professional, I think, is the supported PSAs, and then I think a couple of domain things. I could pull up the page, but really, why did we decide to put certain PSAs and certain ones? Mostly just development costs. The ones that are on the smallest PSAs typically can't afford it. I know that, like Bart's saying, it's like some MSPs have ConnectWise and Autotask. There's really nothing personal. It's not like we have vendetta against them if you want to charge more for them. But I think that we have a pretty aggressive development schedule. We've had, I think, 17 or 1,800 feature requests come in over the last year. So we've been absolutely swamped by those. And I think that right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically get development dollars in. That was kind of where we drew the line, for better or worse, was just, why did we pick that? Because typically the bigger MSPs, like your enterprise ones and the higher level ones, have those PSAs, and that's where we bifurcated. And Carrie Wagner asked the most important question about your mustache, George. So I think that's worth discussing.
Yeah, I think it's just by the time, whenever I do Movember, by the time it actually looks half decent, it's time to shave it off. So I've just decided to roll with it, and it's quite the talking piece with a lot of shows that we do. Yeah, the whole Tom Selleck look. So yeah, I appreciate the love, Carrie.
Yep. All right. Well, anybody else have any other questions? Happy to answer. Yeah, we had a little bit of a Q&A spot at the end. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Speak now, type now.
Forever hold your peace.
If you have any, I don't know, I'm sure we can do a poll just to figure out people think of your mustache, but if you get a 50-50, I guess you could do like either, you can't trim it this way because then you'll end up with a Charlie Chaplin or the Hitler. So
Don't want that. Yeah.
We can do maybe a half off special. Maybe you just do a
Like
one.
thin it, or just keep going and start using the mustache wax. Although I don't think I'll ever get that far. TBH.
Bart says keep it, right? I don't think everyone's going to get rid of it. So I think you're in the clear.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for everyone who attended, and for those who are watching the recording. Yeah, make sure you activate that integration and get all a hold of the promotions we have. And yeah, in terms of anyone has any questions later on today, later on the week, in the future, find Ricky and I on LinkedIn. We're very approachable, and yeah, fire us a message there.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us, guys. We're going to end up early, and yeah, thank you again. We'll catch you for the next one.
Thanks so much, Ricky.
See you.